guys, welcome to the Football Frame of Mind Time Machine, man. We are back with another um, decade of our series, man. So, part two of our series, man. We are excited to be doing this, man. Just a little creation of my own, man. I wanted to go back in time, man, talk about some of the good moments, man, of the NFL, man, how the NFL has changed and how we really got to this point. Going over the the stats and info, everything, all of it. Man, we trying to look at the drafts, we looking at the rushing yards, passing yards, defensive players, fantastic seasons that we haven't seen before. So it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. If you enjoyed the first installation of this, then you're gonna enjoy the second part as well, man. The '70s were an awesome time. We obviously have the NFL merger now, so it's gonna be fun, man. It's gonna be fun to talk about, man. So you know the drill. Like and subscribe to the channel. You see it across the bottom. We are everywhere. We got everything that you could want in a football channel. We talk about recaps, previews, all of that. So like and subscribe, man. We're close to 100 million views, man. Believe that, right? That's crazy in almost 2 years. So it's awesome, man. I love it. I love doing it. Love doing stuff like this. So come on, hop in because we about to go on a ride, man. So let's start where we left off. Pretty much, we went from 1960 for real. We gave the guys that played in the 40s, 20s, 30s, all of that. Gave them some love, which they deserve, right? Because we wouldn't be in this position to watch such a beautiful game without them. So gotta give those guys some love. The leather helmet guys, gotta give them some love, man. But we left off in 1970, right? We did the 60s all the way to the 70s, and our 5-part series to kick this time machine edition off, or series, a mini series, or whatever you want to call it. But we left off on 1970, so that's where we're gonna continue. Beautiful time. So much has happened in the NFL at this point. So we got divisions within the 60s. Now we've broken it up into the NFC, AFC, right? So we got all of that. Got some new teams in there, including the Saints. They started in the 60s. The Falcons, I think, started in the 60s as well. So you got so many, teams starting their journey, right? So they're getting into some markets. Obviously, you see the Boston Patriots. Later on they became the New England Patriots, but they were the Boston Patriots, man. And they weren't that good when they were the Boston Patriots. They had some success, but not like they thought they were going to have. So, but we'll get into all of that as we continue this. But we gotta, goddamn, I'm always yawning when I do this shit, man. I'm gonna be late. It'll be late when I do this, so forgive me, man, if I be yawning too much. But like I said, gotta get it done, and nighttime is where it's at, man. But we started in the 1970s, right? So like I said, the merger is complete. We got all of it. We got the draft, all of that. So I guess we'll start there, right? We'll start there. So Pittsburgh going into this particular draft, we're terrible. We're absolutely terrible. Like they were bad. So I guess to figure out 1970, getting into that season, you gotta go to 1969, right? So the Steelers 1-13 in 1969. Really bad team. But you see some very important names on this list of, on on this info right here. So you got Chuck Noll, man. This would have been his first season as the head coach of the Steelers, right? The Steelers, in my opinion, were probably the team of the 70s. I would say that's pretty accurate. There are good teams in the 70s as well, some very, very dominant teams, including the 72 Dolphins, right? But it seemed like to win a championship throughout the 1970s, you had to go through the Steelers. Like that's where it seemed like you couldn't sit there and say I'm going to win an NFL a Super Bowl without going through the Steelers, right? The Raiders had to do it. It seemed like the Dolphins had to do it at some point, right? Like you got to do it, And even if you were going to go in the NFC, if you're the Cowboys, right? You had a couple of Super Bowls with said Steelers, and a couple of them were classics, to be honest with you. So you had to go through them, and they weren't a tough team to beat. They were a tough team to beat all the time. So we go back. Chuck Noll starts in '69. He's a Pittsburgh. He's an Ohio guy, but he finished out his days in Pennsylvania. He got the job at 37, right? Early to get a head coaching job, even at this point, right? So gets the job. Bad season, right? But I would be a fool not to tell you that 69 started their march to prominence because they picked up some big pieces, right? Now, if I'm not mistaken, you have Roy Jefferson, who even, like I mentioned in the last video, is a piece of their superstar lineage of receivers in NFL history, right? Like we think about John Stallworth, we think about Lynn Swann, right? Plexico Burress, you think about Hines Ward, you think about Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, George Pickens, even DK, he got traded there, right? Mike Wallace, Antonio Holmes, right? You think about a lot of these dudes, they've had studs at receiver, right? And I guess we could honestly say that a forgotten receiver is Roy Jefferson, right? 1,000 yards, all Pro Bowl season on a 1-13 team, by the way, right? But one of their key pieces of this team, right, is this guy, Mean Joe Green, all right? You pick up Mean Joe Green, first round, 4th overall, and that changes your defense, right? Like that changes everything. That's all I can say. Like, excuse me. Getting him was a culture change because I felt like when you get a guy that big and you get a guy that dominant inside, we're not taking these beatings anymore, right? We're not gonna take it anymore. And he was such a dominant player that you couldn't say nothing. He came out the gate gunning. Obviously you don't really know how many tackles he had per se, right? But for a fact that he was dominant in the middle, being a defensive tackle, right? Like he did so much, man. I mean, Pro Bowler, to be 23, right? And if you listen to him, talk about how important Chuck Noll was to his development, He said Chuck rode him very hard, man. Like he didn't let him, he didn't let him get off the hook for anything. And to the point where he said he almost quit playing. Can you imagine the NFL without Mean Joe Green? We don't get that historic commercial, man. Thanks, Mean Joe. Right? You don't get that crazy. You don't get that historic commercial, man. You don't get those moments if he quit that day, right? But he stuck with it. He stuck through the bad times, and he's a Hall of Famer and a winner, man. So, like, that was I think the turning point for the Steelers, in my opinion. Getting Mean Joe Green in '69 was really good, man. So that was the kind of start that you needed, in my opinion, to really rebuild your franchise, right? But we go we go back to the 1970, right? This is Chuck Noll's second season, right? They go 5-9, which is an improvement, right? Very good improvement, right? So if let's say I want to say this was the Rooney family. Let's see, they still in charge. Yeah, so this is the Rooney family, right? What if they said 5-9 isn't good enough? You're fired, and we never get that, but they didn't, which is great if you know the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they've only had 3 coaches in the last 50 years. Because Chuck Noll was there from 69 to like the 90s. And then he left. And then Bill Cowher took over from the rest of the 90s and got them into the early 2000s, mid 2000s, right? And then after that came Mike Tomlin. And he's still there to this day. So if I'm not mistaken, that's 3 coaches over the last 50, 60 years, bro. So we can't start the time machine without talking about the team of the time. And that was the Steelers, man. But you can tell that they started to improve, right? They started to improve and it looks good, right? But you end up, this is 69, right? So we're going to talk about 70, right? The first overall pick is somebody we know and love. Like we know and love this guy, right? For his toughness on the field and his personality off the field. This guy is Terry Bradshaw, okay? Now, before he was the voice of Fox in the morning, right? He was a damn good fucking football player, all right? Damn good. And as much as I love Mean Joe Green was on defense. You needed somebody on offense, right? To really captain and steer your ship. And boy, Terry Bradshaw was that. He was not only tough, man, but god damn it, he was a winner. When Pittsburgh needed to win a game, they could depend on this dude. Yeah, all right. You could say he was a game manager or whatever, but I just don't think so. I just think you need a guy that's gonna get you over the hump, man. Making the plays that you need to make at all times. And goddamn Terry Bradshaw was that, bro. Gosh, he was so good. I can't describe him any better than that. He's just that damn good, bro. And he's one of those players that, like, even if you weren't a Steelers fan, you could root for a guy like that, right? So obviously 1970 was his first season. If I'm not mistaken, he was splitting time with who was that? who was that? There's somebody that took, I think it was Joe Gilliam, right? But he might not be on the team yet. But nonetheless, his first season was not very good. I mean, it was rough. Okay. So you just gotta go with the punches, right? The team won one game the year prior, which helped you draft him in a sense, right? But man, it was not pretty. It was not pretty. 24 interceptions was a league high, right? You can't do that. You gotta slow it down. Gotta slow it down, right? But he was doing his thing, man. He ran a little bit at that time because he was young and spry at that time, right? And then you still got Mean Joe Green. Then you got Mel Blunt in there, right? So you can tell they're building this defense up slowly, and they're building the team up slowly but surely. And it's working. It's working. And you can tell the improvement there. So, although not the best season for Terry Bradshaw, but there are a lot of rookies that aren't very good in their first year. So, it happens. It really does. So, but Terry Bradshaw was definitely one of the more important players, right, in the rebuild for this. So, but we got to look at the standings some more, right? So the Colts win the AFC East. The Bengals win the AFC Central, right? The AFC West was won by the Raiders. The NFC East was won by the Cowboys, which is also one of the better teams of this decade. The Vikings and the 49ers, right? Rams were good too. The Saints weren't that good. Right? The Eagles, after having pretty good success, honestly, throughout the 60s, there's a couple of NFL championships in there. Um it is, but there's this at this point it was kind of bad. But nonetheless, right? Every team has ebbs and flows, right? They go up and down, right? So you start to see teams that weren't so good. Teams that weren't so good in the 60s start to really focus on building for the next decade. It's like, all right, well, the 60s was terrible. We got to start building towards the future. Okay. And that's exactly what happened, man. I mean, the Colts have been the team pretty much of the late 50s into the 60s. They've always been good, right? But they're in an era now that doesn't include Don Shula, right? Don Shula was with the he was with the he got his notoriety with the Dolphins, right? But for real football purists like myself, you know that he started with the Colts, right? So his last season in Baltimore was 69, right? And then he leaves and joins the Dolphins, right? And let's be honest, he had really good success with the Colts. I mean, changing their team around, right? They end up winning. They win some more. They win. Like, he never had a losing season with the Colts, right? Up and down, yes, but still really good. So joining the Dolphins, right, at this particular time was pretty damn good. I mean, they made the playoffs, which we'll get into, right? But he had a good quarterback in Brian Greasy. Like, that's a Hall of Famer. You see them starting to build up their running game, right? Jim Kick, Larry Zonka, Mercury Morris. These are all great running backs. This is a three-headed monster, right? And in all of football, I've only seen a couple of three-headed monsters, right? I've seen this, well, not seen, but researched and lived through in some capacity, right? Right? Never got to see this on television, right? But having Jim Kick over 500 yards rushing, Larry Zonka, a beast, and then Mercury Morris, right? Who's kind of your slash and dash, your flash, right? But having all three of them is a dangerous duo, right? And then having Greasy back there doing his thug thizzle, he good. Then you got Paul Warfield. Come on, man. Stop it. Unfair. Unfair on offense. That's nasty. Imagine if Dan Marino would have had some shit like this. Oh my God. He would have never lost. Never lost. Right? So, nonetheless, man, Don Shula knew exactly what he was doing. He knew what he was doing. He had so much talent. So much. Garo Yepremian. Like, come on, man. Like everybody, teases him for that damn play in the Super Bowl where he just pushed the ball in the air and shit. But dude was a good ass kicker, man. Like dude was pretty good. I mean, he did his thing. And he's a Super Bowl champion too. So I mean, there you go. There you go. But gotta have a good kicker, right? On defense, you think of people. I forgot who was one of their big dudes, man. Goddamn. Like one of their big time dudes. I don't know if they must have picked him up later, but I don't see the name that I'm really thinking of right now. But the Dolphins had a pretty good defense too, right? Made the playoffs, which is damn good, right? But Don Shula did his thing, right? But the Colts didn't stop. The Colts didn't stop, man. They didn't stop. They didn't stop going. They didn't stop getting, winning for real. But this team turned out to be pretty damn good. You're looking at Johnny Unitas, right? Johnny Unitas was the guy. Like we talked about it in the first iteration of this, right? Johnny Unitas was the man. He was the first, in my opinion, he was the first franchise quarterback, bro. The guy that you put on your bobblehead night, the guy that you have to win, right? The most important player on the team, right? We don't win without this guy. That's what a franchise quarterback is to me. I give you the ball, I trust you with the ball, you help us win, and we get to where we want to go, right? We live and die by your decision making, right? Doesn't matter who you got on the outside, who's blocking for you, right? We know that you're going to put us in the best position to win, right? Now, it's unfair, in my opinion, to put all that pressure on the quarterback, but guess what? That person has the ball in their hands the most. So guess what? You gotta, it comes with the territory. We're gonna praise you as much as we can praise you, but when stuff don't go right, you're gonna get as much of the blame as possible. That's just the nature of the beast. It's unfair. I already said that. But that's the nature of the beast. But when you talk about somebody that over at this point, we talking 15, 14 years at this point, he was the league's best player, flat out. He was the face of the league, the first franchise quarterback. He was that guy, right? And I'm just glad he got a Super Bowl. He played long enough to really to get one, right? And obviously he wasn't at the top of his game anymore. This is 1970. He's 37 years old. But the fact that he led his team to a 10-2-1 record, right? Being this old and still balling, You look at, I want to say this is game-winning drives. He had 3 fourth quarter comebacks. He had 3, right? So, he's a guy that had a will to win. And it was really cool to see how this season unfolded for him, right? Because he was just that damn good. And right, you got Earl Morrall. We talked about him ad nauseum throughout the '60s, right? The one of the best backup quarterbacks ever, right? Including 1968. We talked about that, where they were so good and he was the starting quarterback and he won MVP of the league, right? And as we get deeper into the '70s, he did it again. He did it again, including 1972, which is one of the most important seasons in NFL history. So, you got a good guy. You got a good quarterback room there, man. And he really did his thing, man. So, like I said, the Colts under Don, I want to say McCafferty, right? Ended up having a pretty good season as we'll get into a little later, right? But some teams that surprised you. I don't know if you saw if you watching this and you caught our intro, right? There's an important person on the Cincinnati Bengals at this point, right? There's an important person, all right? And not just an important person, but an important person that grows into being one of the most important figures in the NFL history. Okay? That person, for people who haven't gotten the point yet, is Bill Walsh. I mean, Bill Walsh was so important throughout the 80s. All right. He was that guy. As we'll get into the 80s, the Niners and his run of dominance throughout that decade, it starts here. It starts here, right? It starts with being able to do that, right? An assistant coach at Stanford and Cal, right? Backfield coach in Oakland, right? But being a receivers coach throughout the 60s, right? Coming into, the AFL gunning, right? But it was his genius that kind of brokered in the West Coast offense, all right? And I'll break it down to you, all right? So you look at 1969, right? Or was it 70? Okay, here we go. 1969, they end up drafting Greg Cook, right? Greg Cook, if you watch the last iteration, was kind of gonna be this era's version of Peyton Manning. He had everything, the moves, the arm strength, the look, everything. He was gonna be that guy, right? But we didn't have modern medicine right then, so he had I think he had a torn rotator cuff, right? Now in baseball, that can be a career ender, right? But in football, not so much, right? If you get the right doctor to really, really get you right, because I think Drew Brees had it, and they fixed his shoulder up, and he just proceeded to pass for 70,000 more yards, right? So I think if they had that around this time, right, that type of surgery to really kind of, I guess we would say medical imaging to really see what was going on in there, I think he might have been okay. But it's the fact that he got hurt and he couldn't play anymore for real. It kind of brokered in the West Coast offense in a sense, right? Quarterback with a smaller arm, being able to take what the defense is giving you, right? If it ain't downfield, check it down. Let's just keep matriculating the ball downfield, right? So, not to highlight him being injured as like the big deal here, but him getting injured opened up the genius that is Bill Walsh. Because if you got Greg Cook, it's not a big deal, right? You just let him do his motherfucking thing. But it's not the way it worked out, right? But you go into 1970 and you see an instant improvement, all right? Greg Cook doesn't play, but you see Virgil Carter, right? Who ended up playing pretty good, right? Not the biggest quarterback, definitely not as good as Greg Cook, but gets you to the point where you win 7 games, right? You know, you get it done, right? And you go 8-6, right? You do what you got to do and you win your division, all right? So you look at all these things, right? And he's the quarterbacks coach right now. So you already know he's talking to the guy, right? To get them to the point. And they win a division. Important, 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 in my opinion, in the history of the 70s, because he is the quarterback's coach. He's getting you to where you need to be, right? But that important figure is kind of trumped by this important figure. John Madden, 1970. He coached the Raiders 1969, and they were damn good, right? But the 70s was definitely John Madden's playground. Okay. They had some good teams with the Raiders, man. They had some very, very good squads. But like I mentioned, you're not winning a Super Bowl in the 70s unless you get by the Steelers. And I want to say they couldn't do that a lot of times. But guess what? It was tough to get by them. And if you didn't get past the Dolphins earlier in the 70s, you definitely wasn't getting past the Steelers later in the 70s, right? But John Madden, right, is coaching the Oakland Raiders at this point, and god damn it, he did his thing. He did his thing. One of the highest winning percentages for coaches that I think coached 10 years or more, right? Or a period. Whatever the record is, he did that shit. And he was one of the most winningest coaches, period. Like I said, the Raiders were just as good as the Dolphins. Maybe not as good as the Steelers, but they were in that list of top 10 teams of the 70s, right? In terms of winning percentages and everything, they were up there. They're always in the mix. So, like, John Madden had them rolling, right? And you think about 1970, this is Al Davis, so he hasn't taken over the team fully yet. So he's still a minority owner, but he's also the GM. So he can pick his players, he can do what he wants. It doesn't matter. He can just he pick what he wants. And when you got somebody that can, had a real good eye for talent, and not just talent, but talent that was a little rough around the edges. All right. That's what the Raiders were, man. My grandpa used to say, man, the Raiders just had all the reject players. And I was like, well, damn, Pops, was that a good thing? He's like, yeah, it was, because they played rough and tough, man. And that's what it was, man. Like, and that's why I like the Raiders, man. I like their history, man. I like when they get back to running the ball and being nasty. Like, that's what I like. So we'll see how they do this season. But back then, they was fire. They was fire, bro. So, but we start to see, teams from the 60s start to slow down a little bit. Like the Chiefs, winning Super Bowl, what's that? Super Bowl 4, I want to say. Hank Stram is still there, right? And he continues to be there for a while until he leaves in 74 and then goes to New Orleans later on. But he continues to go. They got a Super Bowl in 1969 and it worked out, right? He had some success. They won some AFL championships when the league was separate. So he'd had a nice success, right? But you can tell their run of dominance is starting to slow down a little bit, right? Len Dawson is 35 years old, right? So he's not the dominant player that he once was, but that just happens with age. But you best believe he got a gold jacket though. So just happens with age. But that's what that is for real, man. But then we get into the NFC, right? So the St. Louis Cardinals, surprising, right? They also had a football team and a baseball team at the same time. So Like I said, the Bidwell family, decided to move them to Arizona later on in history. But right now, they're in St. Louis, man. And they're one of the good teams in the NFC, honestly, man. I think they had to go through like the Cowboys a lot, and that just didn't work out because the Cowboys were the Cowboys at the time. But nonetheless, they were good, man. They had some really good players, right? So the Giants are all obviously one of those teams, bro. Like they're timeless. You're right. So they still have Fran Tarkenton before he goes back to Minnesota. So they're good. Fran Tarkenton is one of the best players in the league, right? Ryan Johnson, their former first overall pick, Tucker Frederickson, right, still on the team. So I mean, it gets you to 9 wins. So there you go, right? Minnesota Vikings are still good, but Grant is still there. He's doing his thing, right? They don't have Fran Tarkenton, right? But it doesn't matter. They're still really good. But they got some guys, bro. They got some guys, right? And the most important part, I have to say this, the most important part of this team was the defense. All right. Fran Tarkenton, period, didn't matter, but their defense was what made this team the best. Okay, right? Obviously, they didn't get any Super Bowls, but I tell you what, when you played the Vikings, you had to work for it. You definitely did. So I want to say their defensive line was called the Purple People Eaters. All right, not glamorous at all, man. Not your 85 Bears, not your 2000 Ravens, whatever. No, the Purple People Eaters. And when I say they ate people, dog. So you got to start with Carl Eller, one of the most important players, man. He was the first, I want to say, no, not Carl Eller. He was good, but Alan Page was the guy. He was the first defensive player to win league MVP in NFL history. Yes, he was the one, right? But combine his play with Carl Eller, who was also good, 13 sacks, right? You combine his play with Jim Marshall, right? Everybody knows him as the guy that ran backwards and cost his team a game, whatever. It's a low light and a career full of highlights, right? It happens, right? But they were dominant up front, right? And just in case you were able to get the ball off, you won't believe who they had picking off passes. Paul Krause. Paul Krause, the all-time leader in interceptions. So just in case you got out of the grasps of the Purple People Eaters, you still threw the ball to one of the best defensive backs in NFL history. So crazy career, man. 81 interceptions is like diabolical. I don't think anybody's catching that. Because for one, this era of quarterbacks is a little different, in my opinion. I think it's in his era, the quarterback play was erratic at best. You'll see a lot of guys with a lot of interceptions, but a lot of touchdowns too, right? So the benefactors of those said quarterbacks that may have been a little erratic with the football are the defensive backs, man. So you'll see a lot of interception totals that maybe are a little bit OP, should I say. But doesn't stop a person from saying how great they were, because you still got to catch the ball as a defensive player. You know what I'm saying? So if you ain't got the hands, guess what? You missing out on interception. So I think Paul Krause has some great hands, bro, because he was catching everything. 1970 was actually kind of not gonna say one of his lowest seasons, but compared to 75 and 64, they was balling. He was balling, man. So the Purple People Eaters, they had a run, man. They had a good run under Bud Grant. Didn't get a Super Bowl, but damn it, man. Yeah, the Super Bowl is important. But when you talk about the history of the league, man, it can only be one champion. It only can be one, right? But to get to a Super Bowl is just as hard as winning it sometimes, right? Because at that point, it's only one game. That's all you got. So, but I'm not gonna piss on the Vikings' greatness because they still went 12-2 that season, right? Got the Detroit Lions in this thing, right? They doing their thing. They made the playoffs, on a two quarterback system, right? So that lets you know what's up, man. Mel Farr, like, come on, man. Like, this guy is rookie of the year, 2 Pro Bowls. Like, so Charlie Sanders was really good, really good. So, one of the most underrated tight ends for real. Like, nobody really talks about how good he was, right? So, yeah, some really good teams. And as I mentioned, um, in the last one, the Packers are now under Phil Bingston. Um, and they weren't that good, dog. They weren't that good. After Vince Lombardi left, I mean, Bingston kind of benefited from having some of his older players there and not much success. And of course, he was out of there real quick because you just come off winning a bunch. You just came off winning NFL championships and Super Bowls and shit. That's the expectation. And you're not meeting it. You gotta go. You gotta go. Right? But sadly, Vince Lombardi, got really sick. I don't want to misquote it or say anything, but I think it was cancer. And, he ended up passing away, in, 70, September 3rd, 1970. So, it didn't, he never got to see his work in Washington fully materialize, right? Because he got sick real fast. At least that's what the documentary said. But looking at how good he had Washington, could he have built them into a champion? I think so. Because Sonny Jurgensen was that he was the 60s versions of Matthew Stafford with Detroit, right? He was one of the best passers in the league, specifically throwing the ball downfield. I think Bobby Mitchell was there. Like, he had weapons galore, but the team wasn't good as a whole. So it had some things, but I think had Vince Lombardi lived longer, I think they would have been pretty good, man. So it kind of sucks. It kind of sucks that, he ended up passing away, but the NFL honored him in the best way possible, man, and making the Super Bowl trophy the Lombardi Trophy. I think that is the biggest honor and the best honor you can bestow on the person that won not only your first 2 Super Bowls, but won a bunch of NFL championships too before the league even merged. I think that's the best thing, and I hope they never change the name of the trophy. Never. Like, it fits. Like, I gotta win me that Lombardi. Like, it just fits, man. It fits. I don't know what else you could call it, but it was tough, man. That was a tough time because he did pass away in 1970. But on to some more, I guess, positive news, right? The 49ers, man. The 49ers continue to have one of the best quarterbacks in league history that nobody talks about. I don't understand how you can sit here and I don't hear John Brody's name very often. This guy was cold and he was pretty good in the 50s. He was all right in the 50s, right? late 50s. But the 60s was off the chain, man. Led the league in passing a few times, touchdowns in passing. Like, come on, man. He was absolutely throwing that ball around. Now, the 49ers weren't that good, right? 7, 5, 5 and 6, right? But not that good. But he was slinging it. And you had Steve Spurrier in this thing, man. Steve Spurrier was like a backup quarterback. And I don't understand why they would draft him in the first place because it didn't make sense. But we all know what Steve Spurrier became with the headset on. And he won the Heisman too. So let's not forget all that. So there you go. There you go, man. But let's get into some stats and then we'll get into some playoffs, man. How about that? So now we don't have to worry about the AFL because the league is merged. So let's look at passing, right? So John Brodie, again, not only does he lead the league in passing, he led the league in passing touchdowns, and he won MVP of the league. So there you go. Fran Tarkenton, still one of the best quarterbacks in the league, right? He continued to play all throughout the 70s, including he returned to Minnesota after spending some time in New York. But he even had some good years left. So Roman Gabriel, one of the up and coming quarterbacks throughout the 60s, high draft pick, won MVP the year prior. Really good player. Even he had some good years later on, right? But nonetheless, Daryl LaMonica, AFL MVP, Sonny Jurgensen, as I mentioned, one of the best passers of his era. Johnny Unitas still balling. Bob Greasy still balling. Lynn Dawson obviously slowing down, but still pretty good. You got old man Bart Starr still playing, right? Terry Bradshaw with his 24 interceptions in year one. Not the prettiest, but yes, he is in the league right now. Joe Namath, still in the league. Didn't play that much that season. Ended up 1-4, but he's in the league. Roger Staubach, coming back from his military service, right? So obviously he went to Navy, so you gotta fulfill your military commitment, and he did. And he came over from the Navy, winning the Heisman, and now playing with the Cowboys. And 70 wasn't the best year for him, but I will say this though. Once he got the starting job, that was it. I think Tom Landry just trying to see how bad he wanted it. Right? If I'm not mistaken, I gotta check and see if Don Meredith was still the quarterback. No, it was Craig Morton. So, Craig Morton, Craig Morton is a little better. He got him to the Super Bowl. So, I don't know. But I will say that Roger Staubach was the guy. He was the guy. He turned out to be the guy. You got George Blanda, like 43. At this point, he's like a punter. He's like a punter, quarterback, sort of. He played till he's 48, bro. Like, that's not even fair. So you got some guys. Bobby Douglas, as I mentioned before, he was one of the more mobile quarterbacks. I think he was the first guy at the quarterback position to affect the game with his legs. His record stood until like 2004 or 5 or something when Michael Vick broke it, right? Since been broken by Lamar Jackson, but his record was like 900 yards rushing by a quarterback. Like that record stood for a long time. How many yards was that? Let me see. Rushing yards, yeah. 1972, he rushed for 900 yards, man. And that shit stood until 2000. So that lets you know that he was really ahead of his time, right? But like I said, man, shit be happening sometimes. But nonetheless, let's get into some rushing, man. Let's get into some rushing, dog. So the leader in rushing this year was Larry Brown. Um, that's the Redskins, man. So one of his two 1,000-yard seasons, he obviously turned into an All-Pro. He did his thing, man. Washington went 6-8, so not the best season, but he still rushed for the most yards. Touchdowns was MacArthur Lane from the St. Louis Cardinals. So he did his thing in touchdowns. Let's see, yards per game was Larry Brown. Floyd Little, another underrated running back from the Syracuse Orange, or it might have been called the Orange Men at the time. But one of the best running backs, man. One of the best running backs. So 71 was his best season. But you can tell he was building to something in 70. So but a player I cannot forget to mention, man. OJ motherfucking Simpson. Okay. Everybody knows his off the field issues and stuff like that. But we'll get into one of his better seasons a little bit later. But 69, he was okay, right? Still figuring it out. Buffalo wasn't that good. So he had a lot to really get better at, right? 70 wasn't that good, right? But he's on the list. And you can see his wheels is turning as he's getting a little bit better every year, right? So there you go. He did pretty good, man. Did pretty good. So he's on the list, right? So Dwayne Thomas, one of those guys, 1970 draft, 23rd overall, right? He ended up doing pretty good, man. Him and Tom Landry had a lot of back and forth, so he didn't want to play ball the way Tom Landry wanted him to play ball. But as you can tell, boy, he was damn good, though. He was damn good. But sometimes you got to play ball, and he didn't want to do that. But to say he wasn't good, that would be a lie. So you obviously see Larry Zonka on the list, right? Let's see some other names on here that was pretty good, man. Let me see. And Jim Kick, we seen all of them. Mercury Morris up in there. Let me see yards. Let's sort it in terms of yards. So Cannonball Butler. I love that name, man. He playing with the Falcons in the 70s. So like he's on the list. So he look good. Yeah, he look good, man. But let's get into some receiving, man. Let's see. So the leader in receiving yards was Gene Washington from the 49ers. Obviously, when you got a quarterback, when your quarterback wins MVP and he leads like the league in passing, somebody got to be catching the ball. And sometimes that's the benefactor of having a really good quarterback. You get some opportunities. And Gene did, and really underrated career, to be honest with you. Like to have 6,000 yards in an era that really wasn't necessarily known for its quarterback play. Gotta say, that's pretty good, man. He ended up with 12 touchdowns. Dick Gorlin, Marlon Briscoe, right? Some good names. John Gilliam, I heard that name from my grandpa a lot. Bob Hayes, man, what are we doing? What are we doing, Bob Hayes in Dallas? What are we doing? 26 yards of fucking catch, bro. Per reception, to be scientifically correct. But this is called taking the top off the defense, children. This is called taking the top off the defense. 26 yards per reception means that can't nobody stop you from going deep, and they can't catch you when you get to where you're going. That's nasty. You only had what? 34 catches? Imagine if he played the whole season. Nasty work. Nasty work, man. That's taking the top off the defense, children. If you're a receiver out there and you fast, those are the kind of numbers you want. Like that mean they can't cover you at all. So that's what you want, children. All right. Jackie Smith in there being the stretch the field tight end, right? You hear these names like John Mackey and things like that. Well, John Mackey and Mike Ditka were kind of the revolutionary guys, right? I felt like John Mackey, in a sense, made the tight end position a weapon of choice, right? Well, not a weapon of choice, but a weapon to go down the field with, right? I felt like Mike Ditka was revolutionary in the tight end position because he made the tight end a position to throw the ball to in a target thing, right? I think Mike Ditka was more of an all around tight end, but he gave you an option to throw the damn ball to, right? But Mackey gave you a ball to throw down the field with, right? So that's a field stretcher in my opinion. But Jackie Smith was one of the best tight ends. Everybody talks about him because of that drop in the Super Bowl, which was important. But we can't piss on his accomplishments. Dude was one of the best tight ends of his era, man. So like I said, he still got Don Maynard in there, 35 years old, doing his thing. Let's see, man. We got some good stuff in here, man. You got some real good dudes. You got some, let's say, some running backs in there. Ron Johnson, All Pro. All right, so you got some good dudes, man. Some real good dudes, man. Let's get touchdowns real quick. Gary Garrison, he's with the Chargers, and he ended up with 7,000 receiving yards too. That's crazy. That's wild, bro. And he had a nice run throughout the early 70s. That's crazy. Got 1,012 touchdowns, bro. That was the Chargers too, man. What the Chargers get into around this time, man? No, I'm going off a little bit, but they had Bum Phillips as the defensive coordinator. Are you serious, bro? That's crazy. So he was the defensive line coach in the 60s. And then he got promoted to defensive coordinator in 69 and 70. And then he was back to defensive line coach in 71. Moved to college, Southern Methodist, SMU, assistant coach, and then Oklahoma State. And then got the head coaching job of the Oilers. Well, defensive coordinator job first, and then the head coaching job in 75. Boy, I can't wait to get to that because they had some players. Let's just say that. All right, let's get into defense real quick before we get into the playoffs, man. So, defense around this time, man. You still see some oldie but goodies, man. Dick LeBeau, obviously one of the best defensive players in NFL history, and one of the best defensive coaches in NFL history. Still on the list, still picking off passes. Willie Wood, still real good. Lem Barney, good with Detroit. Paul Krause is on the list. Roger Worley's on the list, right? Miller Farr, first overall pick. Emmett Thomas, probably not second overall, second in the total interceptions. But I remember he was really up there in interception, man. Charlie Waters, doing his thing, young Charlie Waters. So he was pretty good. Let's see, man. Some other names in here, man, that really stand out, man. I'm trying to think. Mel Renfro, yeah, pretty good. You got Dick Buckets in there, 28, still doing his thing. But Ken Houston, like he was with the Oilers for a while, but damn good player, damn good safety, one of the best safeties in NFL history, man. So he was damn good. I'll say John Lynch. What? He ain't played back then. But let's get into sacks, man. Unofficial stat right now. Sacks weren't official until 82. So I got to highlight that. Not until 82. But somebody was paying attention. All right. So Tony Klein, like nasty work, 17 sacks. Like, don't know what happened after that. But to start off your career with 17, that's nasty, man. Jack Gregory, right? 15 and a half. Jethro Pugh, we talked about him a lot, right? But big man, 6'6", 260, clogging up the middle, right? We see Carl Eller on the list. Fred Dyer, I remember that name. My grandpa talked about him a lot. Ended up with 100 sacks, right? Claude Humphrey. I know my boy Andrew gonna appreciate this, man. The first, third overall pick by the Falcons, Tennessee State. He ended up with 130 sacks for his career, right? But he came out gunning. I stacked this first 7 year stretch up against anybody's, and tell me he wasn't one of the best players in NFL history. Right? He was a Hall of Famer after 7 seasons. Like, that's nuts, man. And to be honest, these are bad teams in my opinion. Like, so we'll kind of compare and contrast, but these are bad seasons, and he's still one of the best players in NFL history, right? Balling regardless of how your team is what makes you a legend. All right, you just keep playing. That's why J.J. Watt's so damn good, because he balled out and Houston was terrible for a little bit. But you gotta love a player that's just playing through adversity like that, man. I love that shit, right? But Claude Humphrey, man, I mean, look at it. We go 74, right? 68, terrible. 69, okay. Norm Van Brocklin was there, though. Norm Van Brocklin was there, but terrible. 70, terrible. 72, okay. Norm Van Brocklin figuring some shit out, right? A little bit better. 72, you get a little better. And then 73, you get 9 and 5, right? Awesome, right? But then 75, you're right back to terrible again, right? So there you go, right? Not the best teams to have a guy doing that type of stuff on defense. You know what I'm saying? So, but Claude Humphrey, man, shout out to my boy Andrew. I had to talk about them most definitely, man. Let's see. Deacon Jones, 32, still double-digit sacks, even though they're not official. Gotta say that. Bubba Smith, one of the best players of all time, but like I said, don't really get that much attention for real. But he should, because he was damn good. Alan Page building up his Hall of Fame case. Let's see, anybody else on here? Buck Buchanan, one of the best players of the Chiefs ever. Let's see some names on there, man. Trying to see. I feel like I heard Gary Pettigrew, but Bob Lilly, most definitely Bob Lilly was a beast. Trying to see some other shit, man. Yeah, but we in like the threes now, so. But nonetheless, man, that was good. So your MVP was John Brody. Offensive Rookie of the Year was Dennis Shaw. Dennis Shaw finished with 20 interceptions, 10 touchdowns, 2,500 yards. And of course, Buffalo wasn't that good. So, but one of the best rookies, man. Bruce Taylor, 17th overall pick in the draft. Ended up with 3 interceptions, man. No sacks, fumble recovery, forced fumbles. Defensive Rookie of the Year, man. So you can't argue with that. So, but that's your stats, man. For 1970, man. So we're gonna get into some playoffs real quick, and that's where we're gonna rock it at. We're gonna finish this thing a little bit. Yeah, we're gonna finish this thing a little bit, man. We're gonna go to 1970s NFL playoffs. So, like I mentioned before, the Baltimore Colts, Bengals, and Raiders were your defensive winners. I mean, your division winners, should I say? My bad. It's late, but those were your division winners. But I guess you'd say your wild card teams would have been the Dolphins, the AFC, And then you get into the NFC, your division winners were the Cowboys, Vikings, and 49ers, right? But your wild card team would have been Detroit, right? So let's get into the playoffs, man. So we're gonna start off. We're gonna start off with the Cincinnati Bengals going against the Baltimore Colts. Okay, so the Baltimore Colts take care of business, and the shit Bengals don't score. They don't score at all. And this game was pretty much decided already. Virgil Carter didn't have his best game, interceptions, not accurate at all. But Johnny Unitas was. He picked him apart. Didn't have the best passer or completion percentage, but 2 touchdowns and some rushing yards, man. Like, come on, man. They couldn't stop him on the ground 100 yards from your running back. Like, crazy. So this game was over to start with, right? So then you go to the next game, which not the prettiest, but damn it, Tom Landry wasn't pretty to begin with, man. You win. That's all that matters, right? But they win that game 5-0, right? Now, you can look at this and be like, well, damn, both of those teams stink. You could say that, but I can't let you say that simply because the Lions had a really good defense. All right, they had a really good defense, so they was fighting in this game because Tom Landry, if I'm not mistaken, was the defensive coordinator. He was a defensive coach. So when you think about that in respects to how his teams played, they played tough. They played tough, man, and this the kind of game you got two dudes that you got two good defenses basically. So this score doesn't surprise me as much as people would think. So all right, this is your divisional round, right? So you looking at the 49ers going against the Vikings, right? It's an interesting game because you got Paul Krause doing things, right? But you got John Brody who's MVP. Like, and this is one of the few times that he actually got a chance to play in the playoffs, right? So you go out gunning, man. And he did his thing. He did his thing. So you can't be mad at that, right? But you can tell that the Vikings need some help at quarterback, all right? So this probably prompts them going back and getting Fran Tarkenton in a sense, right? So one of the more, I'd say in this particular era, one of the more, high profile games that would probably in our era be on primetime television. You got the Miami Dolphins going against the Oakland Raiders, man. You got John Madden, coaching against Don Shula. You got the Dolphins going against the Raiders, man. The shit is fucking cool, man. Like, in my opinion, this would be on primetime television. I don't give a damn. You know, like going Bob Greasy, one of the best young quarterbacks at the time, going against a former AFL MVP and Gerald LaMonica. That's a good ass matchup, right? You got old man George Blanda kicking field goals, and the game itself was pretty damn good. I mean, Paul Warfield catching passes from Bob Greasy, right? That's your second quarter, right? And then Daryl Monica doing this thing, Willie Brown picking off passes, Daryl Monica scoring a touchdown, right? But then Bob Greasy like, nah, I ain't going out like that, and he gets the touchdown at the last bit. So, like, Bob Greasy didn't have the worst game, right? But Daryl Monica had a better game, and that's what happens sometimes, man. But you can tell you got a problem brewing with the Dolphins because Jim Kick, Mercury Morris, and Larry Zonka all are going to be good in the next few years, right? So there you go, man. But that's your first round of the playoffs, man. So let's get into the next round, dog. Let's do that. Let's do that. So, after all said and done, let's get this shit on the road, right? So, John Madden takes his talents to Baltimore, and that's where their season ends. I mean, you're going against Johnny Unitas, who's on a mission to win a championship, man. Like, he's on a mission, and he's going through some good ass teams to do it, right? The Raiders were pretty good this season, 9-5-2, but Baltimore was on a mission, dog. I'm sorry to tell you that, but they was, and they took care of business. Like I said, Johnny Unitas with another pretty good performance. Not, like I said, not the most accurate, but that's okay. That's just the times, in my opinion. But George Blanda had to come off the bench. He had to come off the bench and play. And if you know George Blanda from our last iteration of the Time Machine, he wasn't the most accurate dude. But damn it, he could sling that motherfucker. And he was slinging it. But 3 turnovers, gave up 4 sacks, that ain't happening. And the Colts win. You know, they not only win almost everything, first downs, rushing, passing, right? Maybe more yards, but definitely way more efficient. Right. So they won just about everything in this game, man. They just beat them up, man. But John Madden still has some good teams after this. But we get into the next game, man, which is Dallas going against the 49ers. Stop me if you heard that before, right? This is a rivalry, man. This is a rivalry that spans decades. And Tom Landry gets it done. They hold the MVP of the league and his team to 10 points. Cowboys, ground and pound with Dwayne Thomas, right? So Craig Morton was pretty good. I mean, well, not pretty good, but he got the job done. We'll say that. But Dwayne Thomas with a $143 and a touchdown, come on, man, balling. John Brody, man, it seemed like they was putting too much on him, but damn it, he was having trouble cracking that code on defense, man. Definitely didn't look like an MVP, man. But it happens, dog. It happens, man. But Cowboys get the win. And of course, you know what's next. This is your AFC. This is your championship weekend in 1970, the season of 1970. So we get to Super Bowl 5, dog. Let's talk about this. So let's just put the tail of the tape here. So, funny scenario here. MVP of this game was actually on the losing team. Chris Howley, or Chuck Howley, should I say, wins Super Bowl MVP. Or was this the one that he didn't win? Who won this game, bro? Somebody won this motherfucker. I forgot who won this motherfucker. But I know he ain't win, though. Let me go back. I want to get this right. Man. So Chuck Howley so I'm right. So Chuck Howley is like, I think the only player or one of a few, if I'm not mistaken, probably the only player to win Super Bowl MVP on the losing team. So the Cowboys end up losing Super Bowl 5, but Chuck Howley wins MVP, right? You're like, what the fuck? Yes, that's happened. That did happen. But we gotta talk about the game. This wasn't like the most watched Super Bowl. I'd say that. Like, maybe not the biggest, but it was big if you're like a purist, because you've seen Johnny Unitas play so long and you've seen Johnny Unitas do his thing, right? But he finally gets the Super Bowl, man. He finally gets that thing that's not eluded him, because I want to say he's won before. I want to say he's won a championship before. I can't really remember for real, but I know he's won an NFL championship before, I think. But yeah, so he's a 3-time NFL champion, right? So he's won before. But it's something about winning the Super Bowl, dog. It just means a little more, Like nobody cared that the Eagles won in like 1960 for real. Like nobody really cared. I didn't hear that shit growing up. Like, oh my god, like they won in 1960. Like that wasn't popping for real. Like when you talk about teams that won their first Super Bowl, like the Denver Broncos did in like the 1990s, it's like, yeah, that shit fire. Nobody talks about how the Bills won the AFL title. Nobody talk about that shit. They won like 3 AFL championships. Nobody cares. It just seems like the Super Bowl is just what it is, bro. That's what matters. But to get back to the game, man, this is why I said Earl Morrall is the best backup quarterback ever. Argue with your mama, right? You telling me a dude who won MVP of the league is a backup to like a 37 or something year old Johnny Unitas, right? And he comes off the bench and they fucking win. Like, what are we doing here? You know? Now tell me if I'm wrong if y'all go back in history, but I'm pretty sure Johnny Unitas was starting because he literally started all season. So you can't tell me he's not the starter in this game and Earl Morrall didn't come off the bench. I'm sorry, you can't tell me that. There's no way I'm starting Earl Morrall over Johnny Unitas. So I just think he came off the bench and they won. Simple as that, right? Craig Morton didn't have the best of games, couple interceptions, well, 3 interceptions, to be honest with you. But this is an ugly game, dog. You know, they still got John Mackey on the team in 1970. He's 29 years old. So they still got him. You got Dan Reeves. We talked about him. Mike Ditka's on the Cowboys, right? But like I said, Chuck Howley got 2 interceptions in this game, which is pretty much why he won. You know, Herb Adderley is on the Cowboys right now. Surprisingly, I didn't know he actually left Green Bay. But he was on his way to getting what? 3 championships? Well, not 3, but let me see Herb Adderley. Yeah, Herb Allen's a 5-time NFL champion and a 3-time Super Bowl winner. Talk about Herb Allen, bro. But yeah, so you get in a Super Bowl 5, man. Super Bowl 5 was won by the Colts 16-13. You see it's a bunch of field goals and stuff, but this is right here. This is what I'm talking about. I'm actually highlight it so y'all see what I'm talking about. So when I say John Mackey revolutionized the tight end position, this is the shit I'm talking about. Your tight end is catching a 75-yard touchdown pass. Come on, man. Now it could have just been he caught it for 2 yards, broke some tackles, and ran all the way there. But the fact that your tight end can do that shit, that's revolutionary, in my opinion, right? But, you know, make a field goal, win the game, right? Tie it up, and then you make a field goal, win the game, man. So the Colts end up getting this Super Bowl, man, and I believe this is their last one for a while. I don't think the Colts go back to the Super Bowl. Let me see. Baltimore Colts. I don't think they go back to the Super Bowl for a while, man. So they end up winning. They won 2 Super Bowls, right? We know that. We know they won with Peyton Manning. But I don't think they won no Super Bowls for real. So they won in 70, but they don't go back to the Super Bowl until the Colts. I mean, until they go to Indianapolis. And they got some rough seasons in there too, man. Sheesh. Yeah, man. But they went back to the championship. Yeah, they go back to it. They just lose to the damn Dolphins. The Dolphins said it's our time, right? So they end up doing their thing, man, but they don't go back for a while. So This feels good. But if you're Dallas, you lose this Super Bowl. You lose this Super Bowl. And, you lose the Super Bowl in 1970, right? But it ushers in a new era of Cowboys football, right? And you lose this one, but then you go back to the Super Bowl and you get the job done, right? But then 75, you get there, you lose again, but then you get one in 70, but then you get beat again in 78, right? But the thing is, you're looking at the Cowboys, and this becomes their golden era of their team until they start to get, later on. Later on, they get, a boost into the 80s and stuff, and then the 90s. But this was the first golden era of the Cowboys, considering how they started, right? Tom Landry was there in the 60s, and they were terrible. Terrible. But as they get into the 70s, you start to see them get real good. And they one of the best teams of the NFC. So, like I said, man, this was cool. This was absolutely fun, man. I cannot stress this enough, man. This was fun to really go over. We went through the playoffs, man. We went through the stats. We went through the MVPs, some of the best players of 1970s. So, like I said, man, we'll be good. We'll be good, man. And then, like I said, we'll pick things up with 1971, right? But I hope you enjoyed this. Went a little long, but that's okay because I really like talking about the NFL. I really like talking about sports, period, man. I might do this for basketball or baseball. I don't know. We'll see how my time works. But nonetheless, I want to thank all of you guys when you watch this and give me some feedback, man, and talk about your favorite players in the 70s, man. Like, go talk to your grandpa, go talk to your grandma, man, whatever, man. Ask them, man, what do you think about the 70s? And come back on this video and we'll talk about it together, all right? But I'm your boy Cam, football frame of mind, and I will catch y'all on the next one. Peace.